The pale red light of the low-hanging harvest moon illuminates your camp, along with the flames from the campfire cracking and popping, the smell of the wood filling your nose. Fog rolls in around you. Off to your right, a large field of corn. You can hear the wind whipping and whistling through it as the stalks move and shift and shake ever so slightly. Off in the distance you hear wolves howling, and the fog comes in higher, heavier, as the mist covers up your vision for a moment. All you can see is the flame before you, and as the fog rolls back and parts, you look up and see a different etched outline of stars, while the ground beneath you is the same it has been. The ground around you, past the reach of your arm and a reach of an arm again, is different, wholly different. The topography not the same. There's a mountain range off in the distance, and there's woods, and the corn field is gone. There's a strange feeling, tingling, running up and down your skin. You are somewhere else. You are somewhere unwholesome, somewhere you wish you'd never be. And you know it. You remember. You've done bad things. And now you know you will pay for them. This is an introduction to Ravenloft, the demi-plane of dread. Now, I know amount about Ravenloft. What I'll be talking about for Ravenloft is a little different than my typical D&D videos. I know very little about the 3.0 and 3.5 Ravenloft product. I ran a campaign that lasted for almost 5 years, a Ravenloft game. Same game. We played almost every Friday night. I ran this from high school through college. As you might imagine, it was very well received, and it took place in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition. Now, I'm going to talk about the setting. It's a game of macabre horror. You are in the demi-plane of dread, a place that exists as a prison for people who have sinned and done wrong, but the tendrils of that plane extend out to grab even wholesome individuals and to bring them into this living hell. A place created by a pact by Strahd von Zarovich and a Yugonaloth, a daemon from the lower planes. And this created Barovia, unearthing that land and placing it into the demi-plane. And more lords came over the years. After Strahd was followed by the dread Lich Azalin, who did war with Strahd as best he could, but the lords of the domains, Strahd von Zarovich and Azalin as prime examples, are confined to their domain. And the land itself is quite odd. It's as if a huge bulldozer just scooped up large amounts of land and dumped them into places. And this domain, in a sane world, one place that falls into another will have similar topography. If you go through the countries of Europe, one country's border onto another, it's going to look very similar. It's not going to abruptly change. It's not going to be a mountainous land that immediately gives way to desert, and that is where you would know the border is. Now, the border is also often at their edges, particularly on the island domains, the islands of Terra. The borders will be full of mist, and travelers can fall into this mist. And if you look too carefully, if you look too hard into that same mist, you may see forms looking back at you, the Reapers, whose hollow, vacant eyes from the skull heads and black cloaks they wear about them are most horrendous, and these are the sort of entities that claw and pull you back to Ravenloft at any time you attempt to escape, or come and visit you and bring you into the demi-plane of dread to begin with. It's a game of macabre horror. All the old MGM monsters are accounted for. They have a domain, Frankenstein and his monster domain, which they personify with a monster called Adam, which is a flesh golem. They have Dracula, which is done as Strahd von Zarovich. They have the Wolfman in his form as Harkon Lucas, the Lord of Cartacus. They have the island of Dr. Monroe. They originally was part of the body of the continent, the main continent in Ravenloft, as cast to a island domain. It's called Markovia. They have a number of other islands out there, like Surania, which is sort of really, to me, it looks more like Louisiana than anything else, with zombies and the voodoo and that sort of classic style. There's a great novel by Christy Golden out there, Dance of the Dead, one of my favorite Ravenloft lines for the second edition novels, which I'd recommend anyone picking that one up. But that's basically what Ravenloft is about horror, and the fact that even good men will be punished. Paladins and clerics will be denied essential abilities. Undead and werewolves will roam the land, and they will be in power, in charge, and the lords. And the common people of these lands will live in horror and fear. They have strange, surreal nightmare lands and places where illithids rule. This is not the sort of place where anyone would want to be, and it is a demi-plane all into itself, which means it's a pocket dimension that resides there. They have Lord Soth, a Death Knight that was plucked from the Dragonlance setting and put there, and even Vecna of Greyhawk fame is pulled in and made a part of the setting of Ravenloft towards the very end of the second edition canon. They also have a very fully called Dr. Van Richten, who is very much your standard generic sort of vampire hunter. Never really liked the idea of him very much. Thought he was a little hokey and cheesy. And a lot of Ravenloft, unfortunately, is hokey and cheesy. Strahd looks like Bela Lugosi's Dracula. There's a lot of those aspects. However, the game also has a lot. It's very easy to create your own islands of terror and to populate them. When I ran Ravenloft, predominantly what I did was made my own islands of terror and had the PCs go into there. I made a Nordic-style island. I made an island that was ruled by a were-raven, and the players really liked these settings more than the box stuff. However, I was able to use Harkon Lucas, and I was able to use Strahd, and I ran some of the classic Ravenloft modules, House of Strahd, and Feast of Goblins, and there's some great value in these modules. Some of the modules are very well written. They were some of the first modules really in Dungeons & Dragons to not be that linear dungeon crawl. They really talk a lot about the roving monsters and how these things are going to move around and be in different locations at different times. You can't just expect them to be in any particular location. But the game also has rules for terror. You're encountering these horrible things, and fear and terror and horror, these things are really important in the game. So you really need to know how to, as a player, sell, to act, to pretend scared, and try to do your best to suspend disbelief and allow yourself to be immersed into that horror. And if you don't want to do that, Ravenloft really isn't a game for you. It is really the premier horror setting for Dungeons & Dragons, and I do recommend it. As I said, I've run a game the last almost 5 years, the same campaign that was very entertaining to run, and the land itself will sort of beckon and whisper to players once they start doing bad things, and you get to run that whole scenario of corruption. And I really like that aspect. It really appeals to me to run a corrupter or corrupting aspect in the game, and the spirit of the land itself has a sentient quality to it, and once you start doing bad things, will start slowly offering you more and more power. And sometimes that can really get to be a slippery slope for players, and they start clawing and grasping at it, only to find they're slowly devolving into some monstrous form. And if they're powerful enough, the land itself may grant them their own domain. And this can also provide to be very interesting, as the Ravenloft, for that aspect, is definitely a game that can have a lot of player versus player qualities in it. And it's a game that's of high quality and a great deal of interest, and something I would definitely recommend for anyone that's looking for a horror version of Dungeons & Dragons.